right? So why would that gate, if you even look online today, it's all boxed up and blocked up or whatever. You can't go through this gate. So what happened back in the day was Rome, very uninterested for the conquering king, so-called, that the Jews are talking about, that's going to enter in this place, apparently through the king gate. They blocked this whole entire thing up so you can't get through, and then they put a graveyard in front of it. So no longer can the conquering king come and enter this thing, because certainly dead people are unclean. And so we have a graveyard / a block wall. No Messiah is getting in these walls, right? King Herod wasn't exactly excited about Jesus and all these different things. And all the kings through history, not excited, right? Who's the king? Who's the baby going to be born? Let's kill them all, right? So you have this history of everybody waiting for the Messiah to come, the conquering king, and then Jesus decides to come through the trash hole, right? You see that as just amazing? And you'll see time and time and time again how Jesus has this way of breaking down what we consider holy and valid and all these things. And he comes through and he starts to socialize with these people that were willing to accept him, right? That's what he wants, people to accept him. And so you have the sheep gate, which is an unclean thing. You have all these invalids coming through, and just imagine, you know, the animals are a part of this thing. And somehow these guys, it says, Jesus asked him, do you want to be well? We have 38 years that somehow this guy was allowed to lay here for some circumstance we do not know. Right? A lot of people pray to be healed and they're not healed. Some people pray to be healed and they are healed. And God somehow works these things out, and he uses Old Testament to prove that, listen, some are and some aren't, right? There was tons of widows back in the day, and somehow Elijah only healed one, or got with one. And then you have, there was the guy this and the guy that, and somehow God only chose to heal one, right? But he's making his point. Everything points to Jesus. And Jesus comes through, and you can imagine the scattered people about this thing, and somehow he comes up to a guy that's been 38 years in this position. And the deal is when the water would churn, the tradition was that was the angels churning this water, and as it churned, whoever stepped foot into it first got the ticket. They got healed, right? And so, whether it was true or not, your focus is in the wrong direction. Who's the author of what? God. Absolutely, right? So somehow we, and I related this to a Muslim the other day, I said it's almost like us putting our faith in playing the lottery. Right? And yet you have two very great hands and a strong back to what? Work. Right? So somehow you have this faith that every now and then someone wins. Right? So you go put your money down all the time, waiting for this moment, because certainly someone will win. And so I'm not telling you not to play the lottery, just if you win, you have to share. You have a box back there? No. Okay. So, in my opinion, if it were me, looking back, hindsight's 2020, I would have been like, listen, why are we allowing these people to believe this? Certainly we, as a people group, could go and help them somehow, or be with them somehow, or pray with them and get them in tune. Listen, God is the only one that has this ability, certainly not this puddle of water, right? And so what I'm getting at is somehow this was, at some point, they just began to believe this thing. Whether it was true or not, I don't know. So this guy has all of his faith wrapped up in this moment for 38 years, right? And I do think there's a similarity, and I could be totally wrong. It might be a hair up track. But who traveled in the wilderness for 38 and a half years in need of salvation as well? There's only one people group. Huh? Huh? Yeah. Right? So you have Moses cruising around with these people. I know it says 40 years, but there was a stop. There was a stop after a year and a half. In 38 and a half years, they began to cruise around and just wander. So this is a 38-year wonder, 38-and-a-half-year wonder, which I just thought was interesting, but you know, just how there was a correlation of time. I don't even know if it made any sense, but nonetheless. So we have this, Jesus comes up to him and says, do you want to be well? You guys been there for 38 and a half years? You're thinking, does this guy even want it? Right? And don't raise your hand, but who in here has a sin that they like, even though they hate it? I'll raise my hand. Because when it's taken away from you, somehow, some way, God has his way, it's almost like you're not ready for it, and you almost think, man, I kind of missed that. That sin was awesome. You know? There's something special about that identified who I am, and it certainly showed my weakness, and I could accept that because I know I have one. Right? And it's a place that you can go back to because you're comfortable with it, and somehow you have Jesus looking at you and saying, do you even want to be fixed? Right? Do you even want to be fixed with this thing? And you know what sometimes we say? No. Right? So certainly you have this 38 years this guy's been sitting here, and somehow you're starting to wonder if it becomes the identification of who this man is. It's where he identifies. It's where his boys are. It's where the people cruising through are. It just becomes somehow where he is, and you start to wonder, listen, do you even want to dump yourself in this water? Right? Because somehow you kind of like this position, this weird, distorted way. And I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I'm putting it in my mouth because I've had this experience to where you almost kind of miss that sin that you were doing. And certainly you hate it, right? Certainly you do, because the spirit is just absolutely contrary to this thing, but your flesh is like, tasty, yummy, Okay, so Jesus asked him, very good question. Maybe we should ask ourselves this. Do you want to be well? And I love his response because it just shows his position is not there. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. So he's like, do you want to be rich? Well, I've been playing this scratch off for so long. You know what I'm saying? That's what you tell Jesus. Jesus is like, hey, do you want to make more money? Well, Jesus, I've been scratching these things every day. And I'm not winning. The 50-50 and the Monopoly, I'm just not winning. And so he somehow puts his faith in the pool again and says, listen, while I'm trying to get in, someone else gets in ahead of me. And Jesus said to him, right? There's no ask. There's no somehow this guy had faith, right? Your faith has made you well, right? What is Jesus doing with his miracles? What's he doing? He's showing him everybody, listen, I am he who has been spoken about forever. The bulk of the book speaks of me, is what Jesus is saying. And you will know that the Messiah has come because what? As he reads in the other Gospels, he goes in the temple and he reads the book of Isaiah and he says, listen, bam, 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 bam. That's been fulfilled in your midst. How about that? Imagine that Bible study. Someone pull that off and you're just thinking, whoa, who's this guy? So these miracles attest to Jesus. Listen, I have more power than anything on the planet. I can do whatever the heck I want, And so somehow he comes in and chooses one. And this one comes in. And so Jesus says, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. At once the man was cured, and he picked up his mat and walked. Right? This was also the Sabbath day. And now we go back into this Pharisaism that just comes in. And what is the deal about working on the Sabbath? Yeah, don't sneeze. Because certainly that will blow air. Blowing air could blow a sail, and that's sailing. And sailing is wrong on the Sabbath because you'd have to get the sail up, right? Don't drag a chair in the dirt because that's farming, right? Because certainly that blew some, seed in there. You know what I'm saying? This is how ridiculous it got. And so he had this moment, and so I think it's the Passover, if I'm not mistaken, that he's going to. He went to one of the feasts. There's plenty of feasts, but I think it's Passover, if I'm not mistaken. And he comes in, asks the guy who wants to be well. He says, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Now, is picking up your mat and walking work?
To the Pharisees.
Huh?
To the Pharisees.
To the Pharisees it is. But before a holy God, is it? Because certainly Jesus only does what the Father tells him to do. He only says what the Father tells him to say. So God, in all his miraculous awesomeness, comes in, and I'm thinking, well, how do I know picking up your mat and walking is not work? And then you read in the scriptures, you read that Jesus told him to do this. He says, get up, pick up your mat and walk. And at once the man was cured, and he picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath, and so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, it is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. No, oh my goodness! You have legs, you 38-year-old man that's never walked before in your life. That's a miracle. No, it's put down your mat, you heathen trash. Right? Do you see this? There's no miracle. And the other interesting thing that just gets me going is the fact the guy